Hello students. In the previous video we have learnt about the definition of excretion, kinds of nitrogenous substances, followed by the parts of the urinary system. In this video let us learn about the longitudinal section of the kidney followed by structure of a nephron. Children, as you listen to the video, carefully read from the textbook also side by side so that your learning will be more easier and you can understand the concepts quickly. Yes children, let us start with the longitudinal section of the kidney. What do you mean by longitudinal section of the kidney? In a short form, what do you call it as a LS of the kidney? Yes children, when we cut any organ from top to bottom vertically, here I've taken onion. If I cut the onion from top to bottom vertically, we get the longitudinal section. So here you can find a small piece of the onion in which I have cut it longitudinally. So we call such sections as longitudinal section of the kidney. Followed by, in the previous chapter I have also taught you about the cross section of artery or a vein. So when you cut the onion horizontally, we get the cross section. Here you can find the cross section of the onion. So in the previous chapter we have learnt about the cross section of the artery or a vein, in which we had learnt about the three layers of the artery, vein, followed by their lumen. Yes children, now let us start learning about the longitudinal section of the kidney. Kidney comprises two regions in its longitudinal section, such as we call the outer region as the cortex of the kidney, or we also name it as a renal cortex. We know that whenever the words are associated with the kidney we use the word renal. So the outer region of the kidney is known as a renal cortex. So if you carefully observe, I am drawing the dots inside the cortex region. So one of the way to identify the cortex region is that it has a dotted appearance due to the presence of certain parts of a nephron, which I am going to teach you in the later part. So the outer region of the kidney is known as a renal cortex, where we can recognize the renal cortex because of its dotted appearance, and this region is dark in its color. Whereas the inner region of the kidney is known as medulla or a renal medulla. So the renal medulla has a pyramid-like structures. Yes children, here you can find it has a number of conical pyramid-like structures, and each pyramid has a tip. Each conical pyramid has a tip, and the tip or apex of each pyramid is known as a papilla. So papilla is the singular form, papillae is the plural form. So what is a papillae? Papillae are the apices of the pyramid-like structures found in the medulla. Then how do you identify the medulla? As we have seen that the renal cortex has a dotted appearance, the medulla also has striped appearance. It looks as though there are striations inside the medulla. So we recognize the medulla with the help of this striped appearance. Again, we find certain parts of a nephron due to which it has a striped appearance. And this part of the medulla or this part of the kidney is light in its coloration. Yes. So children, thus you can say that kidney has two regions in its longitudinal section, such as outer renal cortex, which has a dotted appearance, and inner renal medulla, which has a striped appearance. And the medulla has a number of conical pyramids, and each pyramid has a apex known as a papilla. So in these two regions of the kidney, we find a number of microscopic units or a number of smaller units, and those smaller units which are found in the kidney, we name them as nephrons. So, kidney comprises millions of nephrons, which are the structural and functional units of kidney. So, these nephrons actually carry out the formation of urine. Along with that, they also help in osmoregulation. So, these nephrons, hence we name them as a structural and functional units of kidney. And these nephrons are also called as uriniferous tubules. So there are other names for these nephrons. So nephrons are also called as a uriniferous tubules. They are also known by one more name known as a kidney tubules. Since they are the tubule-like structures found inside the kidney, we name them as a kidney tubules. So, these are the structures which are found in the kidney, which actually help in the formation of urine. So, once the urine is formed in these two regions, the urine is passed into the papilla. The urine is passed into the papilla. So papilla is a opening through which the urine is poured into the next part of the urinary system. Yes. So thus the papilla opens into the wider portion of ureter. Children, in the previous video we have learnt about the ureter. Ureters are the tube-like structures which are arising from the notch of the kidney, that is the hilum of the kidney, which runs downwards and opens into the urinary bladder from backside. So thus you can say that we find these ureters arising from the notch of the kidney. So urine enters into the first part of the ureter. So this expanded part of the ureter which is arising from the notch of the kidney, we name this as a pelvis. So what is pelvis? Pelvis is the expanded part of the ureter which arises from the notch of the kidney. So thus, the urine which is produced with the help of these nephrons in these two regions is passed through the papilla, enters into the pelvis, which is later on carried to the other parts of the ureter and then poured into the urinary bladder. Yes, children, this is about the longitudinal section of the kidney. Let us quickly recall. So kidney has an outer dark renal cortex which has a dotted appearance. It has an inner medulla which has a striped appearance and it is light in color, and it has a number of conical pyramids, and apex of each pyramid is known as a papilla. So urine which is produced in these two regions enters into the papilla. From papilla it is poured into the pelvis, later on which is carried to the urinary bladder to store the urine in the urinary bladder. And the kidney has a number of structural and functional units known as a nephrons, also known as a uriniferous tubules or kidney tubules. Yes, children, you have to practice this diagram several times. This is one of the expected diagram asked in the board examination, where they will ask you to draw the longitudinal section of the kidney. Yes, children, now let us learn about the structure of a nephron. Yes. As I said, nephrons are the structural and functional units of kidney, which are found in the cortex and medulla of the kidney. So, if you look at the nephron, they are the units whose length may vary from 3 centimeters to 5 centimeters. So, each kidney has around 1 million of nephrons, helping in the formation of urine. If you look at the nephron, it has a number of parts. So let us begin with the first part of the nephron. The first part of the nephron, we call this part as a Bowman's capsule. So how is this part formed? Imagine about a hollow ball. When you press a hollow ball from one end, it moves inside. So, when you press a hollow ball from one end, you find that it moves inside and you get a concavity on one side of the ball which has been pressed. So, this structure we call it as a Bowman's capsule. So, the first part of a nephron is known as a Bowman's capsule, which is a cup-like structure, which has a concavity in its cup-like structure. And this cup-like structure encloses a number of capillaries, or you can say you can find a tuft of capillaries. You can find a tuft of capillaries or a knot of capillaries, tuft of capillaries or a knot of capillaries, which are found inside the Bowman's capsule. So how do we have this tuft of capillaries? We have learnt in the circulatory system chapter that artery branches out to form the arteriole, and then at the end of the arteriole you find the capillaries. So thus, in the concavity of the Bowman's capsule we find a knot or a tuft of capillaries. So this tuft of capillaries is known as glomerulus. What do we call it as? We name it as a glomerulus. So what is a glomerulus? Glomerulus is a tuft of capillaries lodged in the cup-like structure of a Bowman's capsule or in the concavity of a Bowman's capsule. So this is the first part of the nephron. And glomerulus, along with the Bowman's capsule, we collectively name the structure as a Malpighian body. So what is the meaning of a Malpighian body? Malpighian body is a structure which comprises both the Bowman's capsule along with the glomerulus, or also it is known as a Malpighian capsule. So thus the blood enters into the glomerulus, and after that the blood undergoes the filtration which helps in the formation of urine. Yes. The inner hollow part of the Bowman's capsule now continues to form a second part. Now it continues to form a second part. What do we call this second part of the second part of a nephron as? If you look at this tubule, look at this tubule. Here I have drawn a uniform tube-like structure. I have drawn a uniform tube-like structure. But if you look at that tubule, what we find in the nephron. So this is a tube-like structure which is not uniform, or you can say which is twisted, which is highly twisted. So we can see it has been raised, brought down. So whenever you have a such twisted structure, we use a word convoluted. What do we use the word? We use the word convoluted whenever you have such a structure. So now we can find the difference between the uniform tube-like structure or a convoluted tube-like structure. So what is the meaning of a convoluted tube-like structure? So convoluted means it has a twisted structure. So if you can look at this nephron, you have a twisted like structure, and we call this structure as a convoluted tubule. We name it as a convoluted tubule. And again, if you carefully observe, you find one more convoluted tubule which is a twisted like structure once again found in the later part of a nephron. So since we have this convoluted tubule very close to the Bowman's capsule, we name this convoluted tubule as a proximal convoluted tubule. If you just recall the meaning of the word proximal. What is the meaning of a proximal? Proximal means proximity, that is something near. So this tubule, since it is very close to the Bowman's capsule, it has been named as a proximal convoluted tubule. So this is the second part of the nephron. So thus the inner hollow space of the Bowman's capsule continues to form a tubule which is a convoluted tubule. Since it is very close to the Bowman's capsule, it has been named as a proximal convoluted tubule. Yes, children, I told you the outer cortex of the kidney has a dotted appearance. The outer cortex of the kidney has a dotted appearance. If you remember, just a few minutes back I've taught you that outer cortex has a dotted appearance, and this appearance of a dots in the cortex is because of the presence of Bowman's capsule along with the PCT. In a short form we call it as a PCT. Yes. So in the cortex of the kidney we find the Bowman's capsule along with the PCT. The next part of the nephron is a non-convoluted tubule. If you observe this tubule, it doesn't have any twist like the proximal convoluted tubule. So this is a non-convoluted tubule, and it is known as Henle's loop or loop of a Henle. This tube resembles a U-pin. It resembles a U-pin, and this loop of Henle arises from the cortex region, moves down, enters into the medulla, takes a turn, and then again it moves upward and re-enters into the cortex. So thus you can say that the loop of Henle arises from the proximal convoluted tubule or from the cortex of the kidney, moves downward and takes a U-turn, and again moves up, entering into cortex of the kidney. This loop of Henle is found in the medulla of the kidney. Yes, children, just few minutes back you learned about the longitudinal section of the kidney, and I taught you that the medulla of the kidney has a striped appearance. So these two limbs we can call it as, so we call it as a descending limb followed by ascending limb of a loop of Henle. So these two are the limbs which actually give a striped appearance in the medulla of the kidney. So the next part of the nephron is the one more convoluted tubule, which is again having a twisted structure, and this tubule, since it is far away from the Bowman's capsule, it has been named as proximal. It has been named as a convoluted tubule. It has been named as a convoluted tubule, but since it is far away from the Bowman's capsule, it has been named as a distal convoluted tubule. So as the name indicates, distal refers to far away from the Bowman's capsule. So the short form of distal convoluted tubule is DCT. So again we find this DCT in the cortex region of the kidney. So DCT further opens into one common duct. So here you can find this is one of the opening which is receiving the urine from one more nephron. One more opening which also receives the urine from the other nephron. So you can find a multiple openings into which the urine is poured from the number of nephrons. So this is one of the common duct which receives the urine from all the nephrons. So thus you can say that DCT of all the nephrons opens into a common duct, and this common duct is known as a collecting duct. What do we name it as? Collecting duct. Children, be very careful. Don't mention it as a collecting tubule, since you are used to writing proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule. Children have a tendency to write even the collecting duct as a collecting tubule. So you have to be very careful. It is the collecting duct. So thus the collecting duct receives the urine from all the DCTs of different nephrons, and once the urine is collected in the collecting duct, it is poured into the pelvis of the kidney. So remember, we find a pelvis of the kidney. So thus all the collecting ducts pour their urine into pelvis of the kidney. And once again children, again one more structure is responsible for giving a striped appearance in the medulla of the kidney. It is the collecting duct. So thus you can say that in the medulla of the kidney we find the loop of Henle followed by collecting duct, which gives a striped appearance in the medulla. So this is about the structure of a nephron. So let us quickly learn about or recall the structure of a nephron. Yes, a nephron comprises a cup-like structure known as a Bowman's capsule, which encloses a tuft of capillaries known as a glomerulus. So the glomerulus along with the Bowman's capsule is known as a Malpighian body. So Bowman's capsule lies in the cortex of the kidney. So if they ask you about the location of a Bowman's capsule, it lies in the cortex of the kidney. Glomerulus, the location is, it is lodged or found in the cup-shaped cavity of the Bowman's capsule. And then the Second part of the nephron is the proximal convoluted tubule. It has been named so because it is lying very close to the Bowman's capsule, and proximal convoluted tubule lies in the cortex of the kidney. And then the third part is the loop of Henle, which is a non-convoluted tubule, arises from the cortex of the kidney, moves downward, takes a turn, and then moves upward and re-enters into the cortex of the kidney. So we find the loop of Henle found in the medulla of the kidney. So after the loop of Henle, we find one more convoluted tubule known as a distal convoluted tubule, which is far away from the Bowman's capsule. Hence it has been named as a distal convoluted tubule. So the distal convoluted tubule will pour out the urine into a common duct known as a collecting duct. So the cortex of the kidney has a dotted appearance due to the presence of Bowman's capsule, PCT and DCT, which is one of the expected give reason question in the board exam. And the medulla of the kidney has striped appearance due to the presence of loop of Henle followed by collecting duct. Yes, children, with this we complete about the structure of a nephron. Let us quickly learn about the blood supply to the kidney tubules. Already we are familiar with the arrangement of blood vessels in our body from heart to the different parts of the body. Let us quickly learn about the supply of blood to the kidney tubules. Yes, here you can find the aorta. So aorta, which is arising from the left ventricle of the heart, moves downwards, enters into the kidneys. It branches and enters into each kidney, and these arteries which enter into each kidney is known as a renal artery. So each renal artery enters inside the kidney, branches out several times. So thus you can say that the renal artery branches, rebranches several times, and finally you know that at the end of the artery we find the smallest branch of an artery known as arteriole. So let's see. So thus the aorta branches out, forms a renal artery which enters into every single kidney, and finally renal artery branches and rebranches, enters into the nephron. It enters into the nephron. So at the end of the renal artery we find the smallest branch of an artery, and we name that smallest branch of an artery as afferent arteriole. So what is the meaning of afferent arteriole? Afferent means something to bring to. So afferent arteriole is lying at the end of the renal artery, which enters into the Bowman's capsule. When it enters into the Bowman's capsule, it forms a tuft of capillaries. What we have learnt, this tuft of capillaries is known as a glomerulus. And this glomerulus, or the number of capillaries, reunite again forming one more arteriole which is carrying the blood away from the capillaries, and it has been named as a efferent arteriole. So what is the meaning of efferent? Efferent means it is carrying away. Efferent is to carry away. So within the words you have a clue. So you can say that the renal artery enters into each nephron under the name of an arteriole known as a afferent arteriole. The meaning is to bring to, which enters into the Bowman's capsule forming a tuft of capillaries known as a glomerulus. And this glomerulus, after some time again, it reunites to form the one more arteriole known as a efferent. The difference between afferent and efferent is just a change of A and E. So efferent arteriole, it means to carry the blood away from the capillaries, that is from the glomerulus. So this efferent arteriole takes a turn. It runs a short distance. After running for a short distance, again the efferent arteriole divides to form the capillaries. Yes, children, if you observe, we had a capillaries here. At the end of this glomerulus, we had a efferent arteriole. So the efferent arteriole runs for a short distance and again divides to form the capillaries, and these capillaries are surrounding the proximal convoluted tubule. And again this secondary capillary network continues. It starts even surrounding the loop of Henle and continues even around the DCT. So thus you can say that we have a capillaries formed for the second time. For the first time we had it in the Bowman's capsule. So we are finding the capillaries which are formed for the second time, and since it is formed for the second time, we call this as a secondary capillary network. Secondary capillary network, which is also known as a vasa recta. So what is a vasa recta? Vasa recta is a secondary capillary network that surrounds the PCT, loop of Henle and DCT. So this secondary capillary network, now it reunites. So all these capillaries, now they reunite to form a venule. So all the venules now again they reunite to form a vein. They reunite to form a vein. So what do we call this vein as? This vein is known as a renal vein. So the renal vein emerges from the notch of the kidney. So you can find both the renal veins emerging from the notches of both the kidneys, which starts opening into the major vein, that is posterior vena cava, which carries the blood back into the right auricle. Yes, children, let us quickly recall about the blood supply to the kidney tubules, which is one of the expected question for the logical sequence. So thus you can say that aorta branches, rebranches and forms renal arteries which enter into both the kidneys. And these renal arteries, as they enter into both the kidneys, they branch, rebranch, forming arterioles. So the arteriole which enters into the Bowman's capsule is known as a afferent arteriole, which forms the network of capillaries known as a glomerulus. So all these capillaries again reunite to form one more arteriole known as a efferent arteriole, which runs for a short distance and again divides to form the secondary capillary network, the capillaries for the second time, known as a secondary capillary network or a vasa recta. So these capillaries are around the PCT, loop of Henle and DCT. Again all these capillaries reunite to form a venule, and finally it forms a renal vein which carries the blood, that is a deoxygenated blood, to the posterior vena cava. Yes, children. So I kindly request you to have your textbook when you watch this video. Learn side by side so that it becomes more clear to you. And especially again you have to write the locations, you have to learn the locations and functions carefully. Take care. Thank you.